series in our overall faculty and staff development on strategies for student success. Again, I'm honored to serve here in the College of Education as Assistant Dean of Student Success and Strategic Initiatives, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. Actually, I have a few questions, and you who are signed on with us, I'd love to just to ask for your thoughts and reflections on some of these. And as we work through some of this together to sort of share a high level perspective of what student success is, what it means to us, and how we can implement strategies to help ensure our students are successful. I'm going to share my screen at this time, and as we work through this together, one of the things we begin by asking is simply, how do we define student success? And so when we talk about this, and there's a lot of work that's going on, a lot of things back and forth around student success, how do we define it? What does that mean to us? And I just want to pause for a moment and just ask, what are some of your initial reactions or impressions when we think about student success? And feel free to, even if you're keeping your video off, like to just share on mute, or if you just share verbally, or if you like to place it in the chat, we'd love to be able to reflect that. But how do we define student success? What does that mean?
To me, it means that they are learning, they are progressing, they're able to show evidence of the material presented, the objectives that I set for them. Okay, that's good. And that's defined, especially even from a faculty's perspective in terms of student success in a particular course. What are some other perspectives around student success? How can we define it? Because I don't think there's one right definition. I think it's part of the dialogue that we have to continue to be engaged in as we're considering. So how do we define student success? Any other thoughts or ideas that come to mind?
It's helpful to think about perspective, because it could be from the student's perspective, from the instructor's perspective, from the administration, from the College of Ed, up to the president and to the community. So they're all of those layers when we talk about success.
Absolutely, and all reason and important for us to articulate those and to define it from those varying perspectives, right? From a faculty member's perspective of what student success is could be somewhat different from what that student's perspective is on their own from an administrative standpoint. So thank you for sharing. Do you have any thoughts or ideas regarding a definition or a way that we can articulate student success from any one of those other perspectives?
So in the chat, Melinda's put down to her success is the student learning on a deeper level than simple memorization, while also observing their own well-being so that it happens in a stress-free way.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And so as we're thinking about these different perspectives of student success, because it's important for us to have a common understanding of what our goals are, or how when we say we're driving toward this work, or we're making improvements that ultimately will impact in student success, what does that mean? How will we know when we get there? And so as we reflect upon that, a second question that I'd like to ask us also to consider, and that is, so if as we're beginning to think about, and the definitions we've gotten so far have all centered around learning, or learning at a deeper level. Students, processing information to the point where it's not just memorized, but they actually know it. And I think even Dr. Ransdell mentioned around being able to documenting evidence that students have grasped these concepts and skills and being able to move towards that. So what are some challenges to achieving student success? Again, and I would also offer, even when we think about student success at a more global level, even for a college or a university, it is looking at students who are completing our programs, for students who are graduating with their degrees. They come in, they set a goal, They have to demonstrate their ability to learn as they're matriculating through our respective programs. But ultimately, one measure of success would be their completion. Did they graduate? Did they graduate with the degree that they started when they started out and then when they first enrolled here at our university? So as we think about those perspectives, what are some of the challenges then to achieving student success? Any thoughts, ideas, points that come to mind as we reflect upon this question?
Well, definitely some challenges would be setting the appropriate metrics. That's always, whether it's in a course, whether it is across a program, making sure that your metrics and your goals are appropriate to show student success, and that students are capable of and supported in meeting those challenges.
Okay, thank you. Students are capable and supported. And then also ensuring that we have the appropriate metrics to demonstrate, and which, I mean, even if we reduce it down to just thinking about graduation and completion of a degree or a program of study, we have that sort of metric at the end point. But what are some challenges that in some cases make it difficult for students to get to that point? And Mary, Dr. Rinsdale mentioned around students being capable and having support. So what are some of the things in terms of that indicate why that support is needed? What are some challenges of preventing our students from being successful? Any thoughts or ideas that may come to mind?
Well, I think the pandemic has brought up a lot of those.
Certainly. Can you expand on that just a bit?
I'm more aware of childcare issues, jobs, financial decisions regarding school, whether they can continue school or not, stress levels, mental health issues. I think that's been on the forefront of my mind recently in interacting with students. Just how much stress is too much, and what is the excitement of learning, finding that kind of balance.
So finding that balance, and those are things that are certainly coming up and that we're hearing, and I'll actually refer to it in just a moment as well. Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts and ideas of challenges that are affecting our ability to reach or achieve student success?
Access to resources.
I'm sorry?
Access to resources.
Access to resources. Where again, and one of the things that President Rudd has often shared, one of the greatest challenges for students completing and earning their degrees at the University of Memphis, or one of the primary reasons for students stopping out, has been for financial reasons. And so the resources available to allow students to persist because of some of the other challenges. And even as Dr. McGilvery said, in terms of that life school balance, in terms of their abilities to try to continue their program of study while they have many other needs pressing up on them. Any other thoughts and ideas regarding challenges?
Dr. Hall.
Yes.
I can piggyback off of what Lori was saying. I agree with her. And I've had a lot of students to reach out and just share a lot of barriers that they're having, specifically around feeling like they just are out there on their own, that they may be the only one in their family who's going to college, who has pursued college, and they are just feeling a lot of burden on them, a lot of pressure on them. And these are real things that they're able to name that's happening, personally, for them. They're working full time, a lot of them, and they're just trying to juggle everything. And they don't know, a lot of them have expressed to me that they are just having trouble just figuring out how to do this. They want to do it. Their drive is there. Their motivation is there, but they just are really having trouble actually seeing the path on actually how to get it done, especially with all the things that the pandemic, in the context of the pandemic.
No, I think that's a great perspective, and thank you so much for sharing. And I agree with you. One of the things we're finding as we're meeting with more and more students and we're learning about these challenges to student success, what we're learning again, and I think one of the things that the pandemic and all of the adjustments we've had to make as a result of the pandemic, it brought more light on challenges that students were already facing and struggling with. Students that had trouble working and learning independently, those issues were exacerbated as a result of having to learn independently online or virtually. And students that, in terms of that missed that direct social interaction, that it was a drain on many people. And for those, just even from a different personality type, people who are very much really who gain their energy gain their energy from socializing and being around others. When you miss that opportunity and having to work independently, isolated, the social distancing has really been a drain on social emotional psyche of many of our students and faculty as well. And so those are great challenges that we're learning, and it helps us to be more mindful as we're preparing now for semester in the fall, which may go back to more in-person learning, more opportunities to interact with our students, that we can emphasize those structures even more because we're realizing how important they have been to our students and their overall well-being. So thank you so much for sharing. And we also have another comment in the chat from Melinda, which says that oftentimes we're encouraged to increase student enrollment while also increasing graduation rates. Rushing to expand can often lead to lesser standards, which can actually be a detriment to the end goal. We need to be sure not to hinder the success of our students while rushing them when they may not be ready. We need to meet our needs and focus on theirs. I think that's a great point. As we talk about growth, and I think a term that was used earlier is about the balance of that growth in terms of what is our capacity. It's great to have more students in our program, but what is that right size, if you will, of students that we can realistically serve and serve well to meet their needs, to offer them the support and guidance, and to make sure they have a successful experience, as opposed to, in some cases, really just enrolling and allowing students, to come in and matriculate without offering those necessary supports. Can have a factor and can impact ultimately student success and their ability to complete. So again, that is something that we must always be mindful of as we're monitoring our data and looking at how students are progressing in our respective degree programs. So if I may go back then to our screen and ask one more question, and then I'll have a few other things to share. And that is, so if as we're working on defining student success, and we're looking at the challenges then that we've just described briefly, what then are some strategies that we can implement to improve student success? What can we put in place? Things that we can implement as a college, as a body of faculty and staff, and even students to work together to improve student success? What are some strategies that students can implement? And then what are strategies that faculty can implement as well as we think about this holistically as this approach? So I'll pause once more again and just sort of ask, what are then some strategies that we can implement to help improve student success? And I apologize for those of you here, the four of you have not been able to put all this presentation on you. I'm really excited and I really love to hear different perspectives, because this is hopefully not just helpful for you as you're thinking through this. This is also helpful for me to make sure that we're gaining insights and feedback regarding different perspectives of the challenges that our students are facing, and to have thoughts and ideas regarding strategies that we can implement college-wide to help support our students and to ultimately accomplish their goals. Thoughts and ideas regarding strategies that we may be able to implement to improve student success.
That's such a wide question. I'm not even really sure what to say. There's so many things going through my head. Would it help? I don't know. I'd have to study that for there's just so many things going through my head to break that down into one area.
Well, no, thank you, and I appreciate that. Let me rephrase it and to rephrase the question this way. What are some things that you're already doing that you have found to be helpful for students? Because that ultimately does support student success. So as we were identifying students who have struggled, even during this pandemic, what have been some things you've done as faculty members to support your students, even in this moment, during this particular academic year, which has been like none other? What have you done, concessions that you've made, adjustments that you've made in support of your students? Thoughts and ideas, strategies that you've already started to implement that you found to be effective?
Personal contact and being very much aware of where they're coming from, and helping in ways maybe that are different, being because of various situations, being a little looser with deadlines, being open to, well, I can't do it this way. Can I do it this way? Making those reasonable concessions. That has helped my students.
Wonderful. And so it really speaks a lot to great flexibility and the importance of that from a faculty's perspective, meeting the needs of our students. We also find a note again in our chat. Melinda shares that believes that a good way to make sure that advisors are not simply for approving next semester's classes, encouraging regular contact, as you've mentioned, Dr. Rensdale, while also being sure to not overburden our faculty and their workloads. Along the same lines, in terms of, again, making contact, continued communication, keeping students informed. So thank you for sharing. Other thoughts and ideas that you all may have found to work for you, at least, or have worked for you in the past, and more particularly even within this academic year, strategies that you've implemented, perspectives that you've had to make, adjustments that have been in support of your students to help them be successful.
I can share, Dr. Hall, very quickly.
Thank you.
So I'm in the role of a course instructor and also a site coordinator for the juniors. And that role as a site coordinator specifically, I think, it really just it reminds me that so many of the wonderful things about K through 12 and so many of the struggles and that exist in K through 12 also exist when the students are in college. And so I have just found, as a site coordinator, especially, just making these personal connections to the students. And really, when they do come to me, when they're overwhelmed and all the things that we've just said with the struggles, sometimes just sitting down with them and just getting the plan put together, sitting down, looking at their calendar, let's get the due dates, let's look and see what all you have to do, and just kind of talking it out with them. They seem to just need someone sometimes just to talk it out, and just to encourage them that, you can do it. Here's how we can kind of get everything done. That seemed to help a lot of them. I think just like having a place for them to go to, similar to what Melinda was saying, right? Like an advisor or just someone that's there for them, that they feel like they can be honest and open and not, judged. I think that's been really helpful for a lot of the students.
But is that the role? Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Is that the role for a university professor to have that kind of conversation with students?
Yeah. So, my background is in special education. So I might be coming from a certain perspective here, but, I would say yes, yes, I think so. Now, I'm not a tenure track professor, so I know that there's different expectations around things. So I feel like it's part of my responsibility for what I'm doing. I do feel that way. And I feel like it's been very helpful. So whether it's me or there's other people, I think that a lot of students just need someone in that role.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And I asked that question, from a perspective that I think we're finding not only has it been helpful, but it's becoming increasingly more important, especially the more concerned we are regarding student success. I mean, I think there are mindsets and paradigms in which we operated back during a day in time in which universities could be gatekeepers and professors could hold that line there, because universities at the time were not held or being responsible for graduation rates, what have you. But now, as we've gotten more into metrics and monitoring and just having a greater understanding of the impact of all of that, our roles are shifting somewhat in terms of, again, meeting the needs, not just from a pure academic standpoint and from our content pedagogy, but also helping our students develop those life skills, other learning skills and things as they need to not just be successful to complete our particular course, but to help them grow and develop as individuals and positive contributors to society as a whole. So all those perspectives, and I think to your point, what I've heard a couple of times now, just being aware of what our students are dealing with, being aware of what our students need. And I remember when my children were younger, and there was a particular movie, an animated movie called Robots. And one of the themes that was in the Robots movie, it was find a need, fill a need. And as we, as educators, which is ultimately who we are, right? When we find a need, find that our students have a need, there's a general call upon us to try to do our best to try to fill and meet that need. And that is, I think, in essence, the factors and whatever the strategy that results from that ultimately supports our efforts in student success. I just ask one, just any other feedback or comments regarding this last question of strategies for student success, things that you may have implemented. And we have a comment from Dr. Davis in the chat in terms of using rolling feedback models. So the things that we've done from a pedagogical standpoint, asking questions, helping students to reflect and respond, and supporting them from that. All those I think are very, very helpful. If I may then, let me share this. So this is just a simple graphic regarding academic coaching. And one of the things what I like about it is it just identifies other areas that may not be typical regarding with us as faculty members being the true, providers of content and experiences, but also thinking about what we mean when we say student success, some other opportunities that we have to ensure that our students are growing in and developing to ultimately allow them to complete their overall goals. And so one, even on we look on this wheel, is just setting goals. And that's as we work on meeting or advising with our students and offering support to them, being clear what are their goals and having those goals in mind. How are they organized then? How do they prepare themselves? What is their organization like in terms of keeping up with their assignments? And some of you are saying, putting things in their phone or setting remind apps is working with them on establishing different aspects towards their organization. A comment that has already come up, connecting with resources. One of the things that, as we come into know and the overall factor of student success is for us all to become more aware of the resources that our university provides our students, and to get them help and support when whatever those needs may be. Understanding, finding a need, filling a need doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be up to us individually to try to address all the needs that our students have. But the more we are aware of the resources that the university already provides, it could be simply connecting them with the center on campus. It could be connecting them with someone in a different office across campus who provides that type of support for our students and helping them get that support they need so they stay on track, they stay in a positive frame of mind to help them continue to persist in our respective degree programs. Some other aspects that we share and are important center around study skills. And again, and especially students are transitioning from K-12 education or high schools to college. Those expectations are different. Those expectations shift. And we know that there are many sessions, and we have the ACAT courses that many of our freshmen respond. And we know sometimes, especially in the College of Education, by the time students come to us, they're in the latter part of their sophomore year, going into their junior year, where they're beginning to develop better habits. But it's still important that we can share and impress that upon them. And not just for our undergraduate students, sometimes emphasizing study skills for our graduate students can be important as well. Some of them have been away from college for several years before their return to our graduate programs. Some of them, in terms of how to prioritize that, in making time to study, to read the chapters, to complete the assignments, as opposed to just trying to get everything done at the end. And then again, some other strategies and thoughts and ideas center around how to help keep students motivated. And one thing, whenever I see motivation on a graphic, I always try to emphasize this point. And sometimes it's easy to say or to assume that some students are not motivated. And one of the things that I learned from a professor in my own graduate studies, one of the things that he shared with us was that there's no such thing as an unmotivated student or an unmotivated child. Everyone is motivated to do something. They just may not be motivated to do what we want them to do. And the key is learning what their motivations are and how to channel their motivations to exhibit the types of behaviors or results that we would expect, or in a particular course, for them to complete in order to reach that level of success. And then one of the other aspects around our coaching in terms of factors that affect student success has been time management. We hear this over and over again, especially at the undergraduate level, for students who are transitioning from high school to middle school, who may have been able to do fairly well in high school courses without having to put that time in, for students who get distracted easily and miss, when my class is scheduled, and that I had to get this done, and oversleeping, staying up late at night, and then sleeping through class in the morning, and all those kind of things. How to help them develop time management habits, and prepare themselves for that. And then I think one of the points that came up earlier in the Black here around academic and social balance. How do we help students face that? Because that's one of the greatest challenges, wanting to do well, but not wanting to give up who they are, their identity, their existence, and what that means to them, the things that they enjoy at this time period in their life, whatever that may be, is how to create that balance where they feel that being successful in my academic goals and pursuits doesn't necessarily mean that I'm failing in my personal or identity development, and how to help them create an understanding and structure that they can succeed in both, and by maintaining the appropriate balance to help their overall growth and development. And so as we reflect upon these things, I'm mindful of maybe 3 areas that I'd like to offer recommendations to our team, and for us to consider as we focus on strategies for student success. And so 3 main areas that I'd like to highlight just for today's conversation include: 1, continuous communication. We heard that some, and I'll expand on that a bit more in just a moment. Consistent advising. We mean about consistency in terms of having similar messages. If I go to 2 different people, do I get similar answers, or are they extremely different? And then clear alignment of coursework, ensuring that the coursework that we're preparing, that we're providing our students, it meets and helps them accomplish their overall goals and objectives that they're set. So as we expand and reflect upon these, 1, as we think about continuous communication, it's important as we think about student success for us to have some type of orientation for our students at a point of entry. In many cases, students are admitted to our programs at the undergraduate level. Even at the graduate level, they may be welcome, and then they get enrolled for courses and they start. And at what point do they actually have an orientation for new students at their point of entry in our respective degree programs? And in that point of entry, what are the expectations? What will this experience entail? What will be expected of you as a student to be successful in our program? And also as an orientation to share with them where the supports will come. Here's where you go if you need help and support in this area. Here's how you follow up if you have questions or concerns with your faculty member. You start with the faculty member first, then you go to the department chair, then you may go to the dean's office. Just being sure that they understand that protocol. We make a lot of assumptions that students know, even graduate students, we make assumptions that they know, but that's not always the case. It's having clear communication starting at the point of entry. And then it's important to have check-ins at midpoint way as students in our respective degree programs. Having a touch point, a midway. Have they completed the coursework? Are they on track for completion? They spend about half of the time, if it's a graduate degree program, if they're about 1.5 years in, a 3-year program, where do we bring them in to sort of check in and sort of making sure that how things are going? Here's what still lies ahead of you. Here's what you need to be thinking about now as you're completing this. For students in our undergraduate programs, particularly in our teacher education programs, that midpoint as they transition into the teacher education program, we do have some orientation and things there that sort of share with them at that point, but also just being clear, here's what's going to be left for you to complete. And then important for us as we have continuous communication for our own continuous improvement process of having some type of exit interview or having some type of profile, even if it may be a survey of our program completers, asking about their experience in our program. These are things that we're mindful of, but it shouldn't just be mindful when we're preparing our reports for CAPE or accreditation. This should be part of our standard practice of understanding student success. What were the barriers that the student had to overcome that helped them to complete? What barriers were they aware of that students like them were not able to overcome? As a result, they did not complete. sometimes we can learn more from our students and our completers that can be helpful for us to be mindful of those barriers and challenges that may be in place, but for some reason, we may not have been completely aware. And as we think about continuous communication, making sure that we emphasize them in multiple formats. Yes, we can have return to in-person meetings soon. So there may be, again, more formal in-person orientation sessions that we can have, but we can continue to take advantage of the virtual opportunities, learning things through Zoom, and we can still have very efficient meetings, in some cases, orientations virtually, and Zoom has proven that. We communicate with email, text messages, etc., but just not all just saying, well, I sent an email out to my students, so they should have known. That we need to have multiple touch points in multiple formats to make sure we properly communicate all of our goals and expectations for students to ultimately help them be successful. And so our second point centers around consistent advising. And it begins with having a designated advisor, and in some cases, even considering having a mentor. That may be a student mentor, a graduate student mentor, or another faculty or staff person, or someone but having, again, having an advisor to help manage. And I think one of the points that came up in the chat earlier centered around an advisor is more than just scheduling. Right? Just making sure, okay, here's your program of study, here are the courses you've completed, here's what's left. Because we have programs now where students are self-advising themselves from a scheduling standpoint, but also becoming more appreciative advising. Again, being aware of the students' needs, checking in with our, having check-ins, not just for scheduling, but check-ins for student progress. How are they doing? How are they coping? How have they managed these transition to virtual learning? What does that mean for them and their plans and expectations moving forward? And again, connecting them to resources. Here's where you can go to get help. Here's a writing lab. Here's a lab, a mathematics lab. Here's some other things that you can do and take advantage of to help you be successful. And then as a mentor, just having someone to check in with them. Again, realizing that here's someone that's concerned enough about me just to ask how I'm doing. And if I may have an opportunity to vent, or I can share that things are going well, all those factors are very important and mindful. And I know it can be overwhelming at times, especially for faculty and staff, but it's important to know that this work is very important for our students. And it has a profound impact on their overall success. One of the other aspects around consistent advising is how we articulate program expectations at the graduate school level. If there are comprehensive exams that are required for that program of study, when is the student aware of the comprehensive exams? When do they start preparing for those? What do they know about them? What does it mean to be successful? Or what happens if I'm not successful on my comprehensive exam? That's not something to just share with them. And I'm not saying that we are, but the more we can articulate that, the more we can share that with them in their program so they have those expectations, the better that is for everyone. If our students have to complete licensure examinations, making sure we have clarified the expectations. And again, by that, if they speak to an advisor for scheduling, I get the same message. If I speak to one of my faculty members, I get the same message. If I go to the dean's office and I ask this question, I get the same response. And it's making sure that we are all consistent with our language and setting the expectations for comprehensive exams, licensure examinations. If they move into, dissertation committees, what does it mean to set up a committee? All those things in terms of being helpful. And even from an advising and mentoring standpoint, especially at at all levels, but especially at the graduate school level, when students are at some point, it will be expected to organize a comprehensive examination and or dissertation committee. The importance of developing and maintaining good relationships with faculty is so important. Doing that early, how you respond, being responsive to the faculty needs, being professional, maintaining good dispositions throughout your experience here goes a long way, because towards the end of the program, if you've been a difficult student or you've had difficulties, while it shouldn't matter, in some cases it does, it can make it difficult for faculty members who may be willing and interested in serving on certain committees and to work with students in particular. I'm not saying that that's a major problem, but we are finding that it does happen. But again, the more that we can do to communicate and express that importance through our advising and mentoring, the more students understand and can appreciate the importance of developing and maintaining good relationships with faculty, with staff during their experience here with us goes a long way of mitigating that particular issue. And then finally, as we think about strategies for student success, looking at clear alignment of coursework. So one of our primary roles as faculty is to ensure that we're covering the expected content and through our content pedagogy of ensuring that students make sure that our students know and are able to do and or perform various skills and competencies associated with their growth and development in our respective degree programs. So one of the aspects as we think about student success are in ensuring that as we think about the content, expectations for comprehensive examinations, or if they have to complete licensure exams and other expectations with programs, where is that reflected in our curriculum? Where is that reflected in the course syllabi? And how is that being emphasized for students, not just going to a test preparation session or not just hearing about the comprehensive exam when they begin to have that orientation as they begin to formalize their committee, but also they should be hearing about that when they're in their traditional coursework. If they're preparing for EdTPA, it's something they should be hearing about and should be connected well before they get into the final seminar course as they're beginning to organize their portfolio. It's other aspects of the content exams that they have to complete. Where is this reflected in the respective courses, and how are students working through that to meet the general expectations? And then it's up to us as faculty and even staff of making intentional and direct references to these expectations within the course. I don't think we can emphasize them enough in terms of all of our content is important. And so every faculty member who's created a course will say everything I'm putting in this course is important, but there are opportunities to emphasize within that course that this particular content or this particular standard or this particular objective, you're going to see again when you get to your licensure examination. This particular content, this particular standard, or the way you're thinking this process is you're going to be expected to reflect upon this process or this theory on your comprehensive examination. It is building that in and being overt and intentional with sharing those expectations in the midst of the courses and not just leaving it to a preparation session when students are trying to now go back and reflect on all the things that they're having. It's just all the things that we can work on together collectively that can help make a difference and improve all of our prospects for student success. So again, just recapping strategies, continuous communication, doing that throughout the student's program, at the entry point, throughout them, especially around the midpoint, and then even at the exit point of having continuous communication with our students so we understand what they're dealing with, what their needs are, and how effective our services and supports have been. Consistent advising throughout the program, not just from the formal advisor or mentor, but even if we get different touch points or they ask the same question, because students will do that. They'll ask, if I don't get the answer I want from you, I'll go down the hall and I'll ask someone else to see if I get a different response. And all I need is one to tell me this, and that I can hang on to that. And then I have some documentation I can use. So, well, so-and-so told me I can do this. And then we're having to clean it up on the back end. Having consistent advising goes a long way to ensure that we're all on the same page so we keep our students focused and we can offer the supports and direction they need to ultimately help them be successful. And then having clear alignment in our coursework. Again, emphasizing components or key assessments, key components, not just from our perspective, from our own documentation standpoint, but emphasizing them for the students of knowing that this is going to be, you're going to see this again. This is going to come up on your content examinations. You're going to be expected to demonstrate this on your comprehensive examinations and what have you. So we're just, again, being overt and in our articulation of those expectations for our students. There's always so much and so much more that we can share at the student success. I don't pretend to have created an exhaustive list of strategies. These are just sort of high-level thinking points for us to be mindful of that may continue to drive our work as we're setting goals and expectations for ourselves, also as we're seeking to be better supporters of student success. So I'll pause here with a few minutes that we have left for any other questions or comments.
Hi, this is Eli. Sorry I was a bit late, but I appreciate you setting this up. I was thinking a lot of the things that you're talking about, I think from an individual standpoint as faculty, they have bearing, but they also have bearing from it seems like they have bearing from a collective standpoint as well, if that makes sense, that a lot of these decisions, a lot of the consistency, and I was thinking about something Melinda was talking about earlier, she's so good at consistency, but things about it really needs to be a shared within our department's discussion about how to help mentor people, right? I think a lot of the mentor, right, because you can't, I mean, we have assigned advisors to these students, but at the same time, we also have to, I think, take a group. It takes a village to raise a child kind of mentality, right?
Well, no, yes, and thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's where, again, where additional opportunities lie in terms of, when we think about advising, and this may be a conversation, Dr. Zanskas, that we begin to talk about maybe as another faculty development opportunity. What do we mean by advising? What is appreciative advising? What should that look like for us as a college to set common goals and expectations for advising of all of our students at the undergraduate and graduate level? And when you infuse that with mentoring, where do those supports come so that we can build the common language and sets of expectations for all of us? And then what should that advising look like in your respective departments? Because it may need to be a bit different based on the types of students that you're serving and the types of programs that they're completing. And so it needs to be specialized to a certain degree, but even within the unit, there should be consistency, and that should come up. We can set those expectations at the college level, but then within the department and then within the program, that's up to us as faculty to be able to determine what are those key expectations? What is the key message that we want to make sure we are articulating and communicating with our students? Because if we're all sharing, the students and the workload and whatever that number may be based on the number of students in your program, that message should be the same as we go from student to student, from faculty member to faculty member. And what are those key constructs that we want to make sure we continue to emphasize for all of our students as they go throughout their experience? And I think one of the greatest challenges that we have as we're working and the few cases that we get that we have to try to handle and manage from an administrative standpoint, a lot of them stem from communication issues. Students will say, I know this. Or students will say, well, I didn't realize that, or no one shared this with me, that I had to do it, or that I had to do it this way. And so all the more, if we can have clear structure of, all students got this because you had an orientation session when you came into our program. And there was a checklist of all the things that we covered and you went through, and students confirmed that they have received this, they attended the orientation. So we have one checkpoint, you got it at orientation. My advisor, when we meet with them, there's a checklist for advisors. When you meet with your students at some point in their program, you've covered all of these expectations again and making sure they were aware of the same message. There's another checkpoint that we have. So by the time students get to the end and they say, no, well, no one told me, well, yeah, we did. And we have these pieces clear up here. So it's just one other piece that just sort of helps us provide the support and expectations so students gear up to meeting those expectations when they get to that final entry point and they have the best chances to be successful there.
Can I add something else?
Sure.
I also think that it's important to help students understand why we have those expectations in the first place. And that goes all the way from admissions at the very beginning. Why do we have certain requirements for admissions to graduation? Why? And I think this, again, I'm a second grade teacher at heart. And so the idea that when kids understand, when you say, why do we have this expectation? Well, it's because of this. Well, it helps them understand. I mean, it's not just a hoop that we're making them jump through, but at the same time, maybe there is a hoop. Sometimes it allows us to self-reflect and say, well, okay, why do we have this expectation in the first place? Maybe it's an old archaic thing that we had this discussion the other day with a comprehensive exam. So why do we have them shut for 3 days in one room without being able, and then we expect them to cite off 15 people by heart that talk about this, rather than, that's not real. We don't do that in real life as a faculty member. Why do we have them do it? So is there some wiggle room? Do we need to change and adapt, right?
No, I think that's a great perspective, and you're absolutely right. One, I don't think we can, again, as we said, communication is so key. I don't think we can communicate enough. The students know and set those expectations. But then I think also for us as faculty, as we go through these and identify these checkpoints and as we are consistent with our expectations, that becomes a great time for us to ask the questions, is this still a relevant expectation that we have in this day and time for what we want our students to know and be able to do? And that's up to the faculty to sort of ask that question and to have our debates and to come up with some reasonable, resolution as to what we feel is important. But then also, to your point, is helping as we then communicate that to our students, helping them to understand the why, right? And why is this in place? Why is this important? Why? And more than just, because, well, it's university policy and procedure. It's why for you to make sure that you're demonstrating that you've been able to conduct rigorous research that withstands scrutiny. And we want to make sure that you're demonstrated your abilities, you develop the skills and competencies and demonstrated your ability to do that at a high level. That is the expectation we have for students in our program. And so all the measures that we have in place are designed to help you do that. And that goes a long way. Setting that up front, again, it is very key and helpful, especially in an orientation-like setting where students get that, they understand what this program is about. So as you deal with, if there are questions or concerns, or we happen to face challenges with students, again, we have that foundation that's already been set that we can continue to draw back to.
Those are really good points. I wanted to note that the Graduate Council, we did talk about having sessions or professional development sessions on advising this March. I brought it up because I think it's one of the things we could benefit from throughout the college.
Absolutely, really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
No, very good. I'm really glad to hear that, and looking forward at whatever we can to share. Again, as we're in the process of getting feedback and a lot from our students through our accreditation process, that we'll be able to share that can help inform some of those practices, and just, again, being mindful. I think all of this work is just one of the things that we're finding about student success in universities who've made great strides in student success. And Georgia State is always one that sort of comes to the top of the list for some great strides that they've made of supporting and helping students of color, students from disadvantaged backgrounds be successful at the university, has all come down to the structures that they have in place, structures of support, not just the passion and compassion of an individual faculty member who took this student by the hand and helped them through it. For it to be consistent and systemic, there has to be structures that are put in place to help ensure that those are sustained throughout a student's program and throughout the ins and outs or development and the transition among our faculty as a whole. Well, those are all the points that I have prepared to share with today. I appreciate your insights, the input and the feedback and the questions. It's because I think as we, again, it was never intended to say that we're going to solve all these issues today, but it's raising the questions, it's asking the right questions, having the right dialogue to get at some realistic solutions that we can implement to help make a difference in the success of our students and the primary reason why we are all here. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Hope something was said and done to support you in your own specific efforts as an individual faculty, staff member, and also as a member of our great college that we're continuing to grow and improve.